Good evening and welcome to Monday Motivation. My name is Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Yes, tonight we're talking about the importance of regaining and rebuilding our voices. What most of us don't realize is that somewhere down the line, we actually stop building our voices get muted along the way, and as opposed to actually discovering what we think, how we think, why we think the way we do, we start to adopt and borrow from our environment. Rowan once said, we should not try or hope for things to change to get better, but we should rather be better. And the thing is that as a coach, as a mindset development specialist, as a pastor, I often find this actually to be true, that a lot of people want for situations around them to get better. And one of the aspects that they wish to actually see get better is how other people talk to them or the things that other people are saying to them. You find a lot of people actually having a problem and blaming other people for the things that they have said. But unfortunately, in that very same process, when you ask them, what did you say in return? Somebody would say, well, it doesn't actually matter anyway what I say, because if I say anything, nothing is going to change. And then you see, this is actually a learned helplessness behavior. And part of that learned helplessness along the way is that our voices are not powerful. And as a result, we never get to use our voices as a meaningful tool to change the environment and to contribute to the environment, what we want from out of that environment. So in thinking about this tonight, I want you to think about the importance of language. And language isn't just a tool of expressing our thoughts, but also language does a crucial role in our lives, and that is to program the way that we think. And here's another thing to think about, that we spend, I would dare say, over 90% of our thinking or of our hearing comes from our own thoughts. We have most of the conversations with ourselves more than we are having with other people, or more than other people are talking to us. Even right now, as you are listening to and you're watching here, as much as you're hearing my voice, you are still very much in your own voice. Whether you be alone in the car driving, whether you be alone at home about to sleep, whether you be alone waking up or taking a shower, the reality is that you are constantly talking to yourself. And if you're not careful of how you talk to yourself, you'll continue maintaining that state of learned helplessness, where actually the only place where your voice is loud is in your head. But unfortunately, if your voice is loud only in your head and it is not part of the environment, it also means that quite a lot of what you're thinking, what you're saying to yourself, is not your own ideas. Actually, it's more like adopted ideas. How do you develop your own voice? I think the first starting point is self-awareness. And for us to be self-aware, we got to be aware of a couple of things. We got to be aware of the way that we think, our minds. We've got to be aware of our emotions, the way that we respond to the way that we think, and the way that we respond to the environment and things that are happening to us. We've got to also be aware of our inner discussions, our inner talking. In terms of our inner talking, let me ask you this question. What do you think about your own abilities to achieve things, to succeed? What do you think about your own voice? Do you think that your voice matters in the environment that you're in the relationships that you're part of, in the work environment that you're part of? Whenever important things are being discussed, does your voice go mute, or does the environment benefit from your wisdom, from your experience, from your own ideas, from your own observations? Do you think that your voice matters in situations or in environments or in areas that are important to you, or do you think that it is not? Whenever you are asked your own opinion, do you start off by self-censoring, by making statements like what? I'm not smart enough, I'm not experienced enough, I know that this might not be the best idea, this might be offensive. You start with those disclaimers where you start actually telling people that you are talking to not to take what you're about to say seriously, because you don't take what you think and what you say to yourself seriously. And that is important to understand, that if you're not self-aware, if you cannot identify the way that you speak with yourself, you will continue to undermine, to take for granted your own voice. The question is, where does it come from? Quite a lot of us are not aware of the fact that somewhere down the line in our upbringing, we start to get muted. The exciting, adventurous process of learning, when we're asking questions as children, somewhere down the line, it begins to shift from something that gets celebrated when we first speak our own words or when we're asking our first silly questions to where we start to getting judged. Many of us have experienced situations where when we're asking questions, we're either told that we're not smart enough, or questions are unnecessary, or we're asking questions because we've been disruptive, or that we don't listen. And all of a sudden, we actually realize that if you don't know, and if you're asking questions, actually you become a problem in society, and you begin to lose your social currency. And somewhere down the line, then you start to then assimilate into the ideas that are already accepted in the environment. More so in our African environment, where we are an assimilative society, where we worry, or whether part of our value is in our ability to be one. It's in our ability to be collaborative. It's in our ability to speak the same language, to have the same rituals, to have the same traditions. Whereas contrary to maybe the West, where the West tends to celebrate more individual thought more than Africa does. And this is something that you're going to also be aware of, that the environment that you come from can severely impact the way that you perceive your own voice. And part of the reason why maybe you don't take your own voice seriously is because growing up in the environment, it was never taken seriously. The second thing that you need to do to understand is to build your own ideas and test and prove them against what you're trying to achieve. Now, this is something that is maybe a bit difficult to do, but it is something that is very, very necessary. And part of that is that in the process, you will fail. See failure as that treasure trove of valuable insight where you can take lessons from and be able to apply that. As opposed to saying, I've tried this before and it never worked out, you can say something like, I have learned a lot of lessons from my previous attempt, but now that I've learned those lessons, I'm actually now much better positioned to succeed than when I first tried. In other words, it's important to have that growth mindset and to allow yourself the space to say, I am not yet competent, but with every attempt that I make, I will eventually reach the level of proficiency that will help me to succeed and to achieve what I want. It's important to get to that particular point. The other way, or the other questions that we have to ask ourselves is, for example, when the situation asks for you to contribute, do you hesitate to contribute? Do you start to talk yourself out of contributing and being part of the discussion? In a relationship, do you always find yourself frustrated because you have difficulty projecting to articulate your own thoughts? And that is a problem, because what happens is this, that when we don't speak up for ourselves in relationships, in the work environment, in whatever important relational setting we may be part of, then we're setting ourselves up for resentment in the future. We're setting ourselves up for bitterness in the future. And what starts to happen is that everything then starts to lose its value. And unfortunately, some people, when they're resentful and bitter, then it starts to impact the entire psyche, every single part of your life. And that is why then it is important to learn to speak about what is important to you. Because the moment that we don't speak about what is important to us, our relationships become poorer for it, because they're missing that valuable insight that we might actually have. In thinking still about speaking up for yourself, it is important to consider why it costs you more when you don't speak up than when you do. A lot of people lose out on promotions, for example, because they can't speak up for their work. Many people lose out on achieving and getting the things that they want because they cannot express that that's what they desire. In relationships end up failing because the other person does not articulate their expectations clearly to the other person. And as a result, the one that is able to articulate their thoughts assumes that everything is fine, only to find that in a counseling session that everything is not fine. And it is a bit unfair when we don't take the time to learn to articulate our thoughts in the work environment, in our relationships, in whatever situation we might find ourselves in, and then expect for other people to understand or to know what it is that we need. We ourselves have great difficulty processing and making sense of the chaos that's already in our own mind, let alone expecting for someone else to all of a sudden figure it out magically. And then I think it's a bit of a cowardice, it's a bit of a coward way of getting out of situations where you place the burden on the other person as opposed to actually placing the burden on yourself and then developing the courage to learn how to speak up for yourself, and in so doing getting the respect. Because for as long as you don't speak up for yourself, people won't respect you. Because part of what happens when you speak up for yourself is that you teach people how to treat you. If you don't say, I'm not comfortable, I'm hurt, I don't like this, I don't know, and I assume that you're okay with it and I'll continue with it. And unfortunately, the more you don't do that, the more I'll have to take the lead to lead you in the situation, and it might not be something that you like. And I might find myself speaking up on your behalf, misrepresenting your own intentions because you haven't learned how. Well, with everything that we've discussed this evening, I hope that you've learned some tricks and tools on how to develop your own voice and to regain your own voice, and understand that it is crucial for your environment, for your relationships, and even for your career. My name is Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Enjoy the rest of your programming. I'll see you again next week.